like server security and finding bugs in plugins, all that stuff I've got in this second one. And then this third link is about a power source that I think will do really, really well for replacing coal and oil. Let's see. To install BackWPUP, you just follow the normal plugin installation instructions. So from plugins, you can search for BackWPUP. Oops, sorry. Wrong one. Add new, search for BackWPUP. And the free version is the one that shows up first, and the installation process is completely the normal one. It should work. Once it's installed, you will have it appear in the top bar, but you'll also have it appear in normal place. The dashboard here does give you some news. It tells you when your next jobs are scheduled. I'll get into that more. And it tells you a little bit about the Backup Pro. One of the, there are some things that the professional version will let you do that you can't do with the free version. So you can do a complete database backup. It is multi-site compatible. You can check the integrity of your database while you're backing up. It's important to know that if there's a problem with your database, you want to know that so you're not relying on it for if something really goes bad. You want to keep your backups. Good reason to keep past backups is in case something goes wrong between that backup and the backup you're doing now. A lot of other features. Some of the main ones that are not in the free one is you can't back up to Google Drive or Amazon Glacier. There's some additional highly technical things. This differential backup is the ability to see what changed between backups, and that is only in the professional. I've never needed that, but I know of circumstances when you might. And then the professional version, they do have premium support. The free version also has the normal WordPress support that is available just about for every plugin. And people ask their questions on there frequently, and they are answered quickly, and they are answered well, both by the authors of the plugin and by members of the community using it. And so I'm still using the free version. Next thing from the, it has a list of all the jobs. I'll go over how to create jobs in a moment, but I've got one for full backup, which is the database and all of the files that are associated with WordPress, including all the videos or pictures that I've got. But you can also set it up to back up anything that's outside of WordPress that are files that you'd want to back up. I've got another one, and I run that infrequently. Then I've got one that's set up for just the WordPress database and the uploaded images, etc., that go with the WordPress blog itself. And that I've got run on a schedule that's currently inactive. And then I've got one that's literally WordPress only without the optimizing, and that I run, I think, twice a week. Then Then add new job. I'll cover all the details of that in a moment. It also lets you have logs of all the backups that you've done. Now, I deliberately left this in here. One of the things that I like about this plugin is if there's something about the way you've configured it, or if there are folders that it doesn't know how to read, or something that it doesn't have permissions to, it lets you know so you can go and fix it. And the messages are clear. Now, I've seen other backup plugins where if something is wrong with your setup or whatever, it doesn't say a thing. So that right there, that it says 8 warnings there, is one of the reasons I sided with this one. Another is it's one of the few that says explicitly, yes, it is multi-site compatible. This one is just an archive of all the backup sets that have been done. I'm going to go through and clean these out. Some of these are for, like subdomains that have no activity whatsoever and shouldn't be backed up. Those are actually literal subdomains for there that nobody cares about. But there's a backup of your archives. One of the settings that I really like is this admin bar. Show the backup links in your admin bar so it appears right there at the top of the screen. And I'll go over the rest of these in just a moment. The About screen, it gives you a description of the plugin. And then if you need to do anything with technical support, it gives all the differences. Okay, what I'm thinking of is not in this screen. Okay, settings information. It gives a lot of the technical information that you would use if you have a technical support problem, or if you need to figure out what the settings are that you would want to use. For example, it will give you the full path to all of your files on your server. Okay, the general page in settings is pretty short. The settings for jobs, number of retries for job steps. So if your server is busy or something, and it will retry up to that many times to get something to work. I have it set to restart on every main step. That is also for just to make sure things don't time out. If you find that your job is failing, one of the things to check is the maximum execution time. By the way, what I'm doing there is just hovering over the field. It will sometimes give you pop-up help. On an older server, I was having troubles with some of the compression methods. It turned out to be they hadn't updated their version of PHP. And that version of PHP had bugs in creating zip files. And so the backup program was failing. And this other backup program was failing. And WordPress updates weren't working. It was all traced back to bugs in zip. So here you've got the ability to change what form of zip you are using. For most servers, auto works just fine. You can set it up. You can protect the jobs from unauthorized people starting your backups. And so you just type some random code in there to make it a little more secure. It does have translations for foreign languages. You check it for no translations, and the log of what the plugin did during your backup will be written in English. Uncheck that, and it will do the translation to Spanish or whatever language you said your blog is in. I've never had to reduce server load. I suspect if you need To enable this, you should probably just get a more modern server, but it has that ability. You've got settings for your logs, so what you would want to have here is whatever your username is, you would type that in that field. And again, that information tab will give you a clue what that should be. So home and then your username, the full path to your basically WP content, or put it above WP content. In some of my setups, I have made this into /logs, which makes it harder for people to access it from outside of your account. And let's see. I'm not, yeah. So,
I don't know the answer to this. Why do I need a plugin for backup? Doesn't my server back up my blog or my website?
Yes, they do.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's like the answer to that is
Karsten's.
they're supposed to.
Ask Seth Karsten's. He was relying on a server backup one time, lost an entire site.
Okay. All right. So this gives you more information than what you would get from a backup from your host company.
Yeah. So the host company is supposed to. They might not.
Okay.
They might back up once a week, and you just did a bunch of work yesterday.
Right. Okay.
The host backup will back up your entire account.
Okay.
You might want to move one of your blogs to another account. With this, you can back up your separate WordPress installation along with all the files you need for it. Leave the others separate.
Okay.
With something as important as a website backup, you really want to be in control of it.
Okay. Right.
You want to have control over that.
Yeah.
And did I hear you at the beginning saying something about that it's giving you your file path? Isn't that what I was asking you about? Is that
That's an example, yeah.
If I use this, then I would know where
That's where, yes. And I think Joe is probably going to do a little bit of that later on
Okay,
too.
great.
So
Okay, good.
Yeah, all you need to really know for the answer to what would you fill in, like what file folder do you use for that? If you get this wrong, your backups, the software will try to install it in the location you've specified, and if you specify it wrong, then your backup can't get saved and you'll get an error. Fine, ask somebody who's technical and understands this stuff to set it up for you. It only has to be done once on this account.
So is that something that you could get tech support from your host company for? Make sure that it's set up.
Your host company, or
you guys,
or one of us,
right?
Or your your techie friend who lives next door,
Right.
whatever.
Right. Okay.
Is that pre-filled in by default, or was it?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I suspect it is.
backup is, so if it accidentally.
Yeah, if it isn't automatically filled in, I know of some plugins that have just said, okay, this isn't properly filled in, try this. And that would usually be correct.
And so why would you be using this one rather than Backup Buddy? Because I know you guys always talk about Backup Buddy. You find this one easier, simpler, bigger? What?
Backup Buddy is not, they don't say they're multi-site compatible.
Okay.
This one's free. Backup Buddy is low cost.
Okay.
So, I mean, not much of a difference there. Backup Buddy might actually work fine on multi-site. I haven't tested it, so there might not be much of a difference there. For me, the main thing is yes, it is multi-site compatible. I've tested it with multi-site. It does work. And the other thing is, I really like that this one tells me so clearly,
How to use it?
not so much how to use it, but if something went wrong,
Right. The warnings.
the warnings.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll have time to actually run a backup because some of them, they take some time. But there have been folders that are not real folders; they're links to the actual folder someplace else, and this won't back up those. The technical term for them is symbolic links. Good reason for that is that you could back up the folder and the link to the folder and wind up backing up that huge folder multiple times. BackWP up doesn't back up the symbolic links, and it tells me it didn't do that. Those warnings that were showing on the screen was I had 8 of those folders linked, and it's letting me know exactly what folders they are, and it's like, oh, good. Well, that's no problem. I understand that. Since then, I've cleaned that up. So it doesn't even attempt to anymore. So let's see, I think I finished on all of the settings.
What's the API keys up there?
There are other programs that you can link to backup through this, and I've never used one of those, and most people wouldn't use it, but it's got it in there. So for right now, there's nothing there. Notice there isn't even a place to put anything in there.
That's a premium. Wasn't that premium?
I was about to say, I think that's one of the things that is only for premium.
So that's not the authorization to use the plugin.
No, that's the authorization for some of the premium features.
Okay.
Okay, so we've covered about and settings and backups and logs. Let's go into the settings for add a new job. So right here, it has just these 5 options. As you configure what you want your job to do, including, do you want the backup emailed to you? Do you want to copy it over to some site like an Amazon site or Dropbox or something like that? You'll get more tabs in here. It defaults to you want to back up the database, which you're probably always going to want that one set. It will create a SQL file. We'll cover that a little more detail later on if we've got time, but you load this back in through your MySQL administration tool, which for most people would be phpMyAdmin, and you just import it through that. I'll also say that if you don't know what that is, you should probably just get somebody to come in and set things back up for you. Because trying to do this when you're a novice and freaking out about your site is down, it's better to just bring in someone who knows how to do it. It's complex for novices. It's easy for, who are the technical people in here? Just like, okay, come to one of us. It doesn't take long. It's not hard. We know how to do it. I will say something else, though. One of the things that's really good for you to know is that your backup works, that the whole process, if your site goes down and you need to restore from the backup, it's good to know that you can restore. And the way to do that is not on your live site that's working, restore on another installation of WordPress so that you're not ruining anything trying to make sure you're covered. And that would be a good thing to do now with any backup program. Almost. Those locations of a lot of your files, those are stored in the database. And so if you're installing WordPress in another location, whether it's on the same account or somebody else's account, you'll need to run the tool to change all those locations. So it will load, but you click on links, and they'll go to the real site, not the test site. And it'll try to pick up images off of the real site, but it can't because it's an internal address. So you'll see little glitches like that. And I forgot to write down what the name of some of the plugins are that do that. I can
Are you talking about rewrite links?
to rewrite the links, and
Velvet Blues is one. Velvet Blues.
can you put that on the one of the slides, or post it?
I'll post on the Meetup.
Post it on Meetup. That's a good one to know. So, does that make sense?
The simple script that it writes, is it all the data that's going to be in the database that actually writes the tables and it writes the data? So you don't need to take, just hold on to that and you're all set. If something happened, you can run that and rebuild the database.
It rebuilds the database from creating the tables and the fields and the data that's in it and all the temporary data that WordPress uses that you'll never see.
So it's not like that's the first file sync, and then you have to go to the data piece or something and run that to create the backup. That's not the case.
Right.
Okay, that is.
And if you set up a job that will also back up the files, then all of your images, multimedia, etc., can go with that.
Put all your pictures on the one subdirectory.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'll say this in a minute. Oh, actually wasn't done there. Okay, all this computer gibberish under archive name, you could just leave it the way it is. If you hover over there, it'll tell you what all those little codes mean. Very important to specify if you've got multiple installations of WordPress, which one you're backing up, and you should always have the year, month, and date, and for me, time of when you're backing it up. tar gzip is a good one to use. Try that one first. And then for the job destination, if you're backing up all your files, you'll want to back it up either to a folder or to one of the services, or both. Yes, you can check multiple. If you're just doing a backup of the database only and you're doing it for some special reason, you can have that sent to you via email. Just check that your email service can handle that large a file. And then I have it send me only when there's an error, but you might want to start out with having it send you, every time the backup is done, send you the log so that you can check that there's no errors and you know everything's working. Yeah, exactly. You want to know if your backup's not going. For schedule, manually run is good. I only do the backup with all of my files manually because that turns out to be about 2 gigabytes. And I've had my some hosting providers complain about, hey, we don't want you storing backups here, which is what the Amazon S3 would be for. So I only run the backup everything manually. For most of the time, I use the WordPress cron, which is the automatic scheduler. And then you just pick a time you want it to run at, and it will run at those times. I usually do my backups, because I'm not making all that many changes, weekly, and just pick some some unusual time where not much is going on. For the real technical ones, you can run it off of WP CLI. If you don't know what that is, I wasn't talking to you.
And where is it that you're saving all your backups?
Under General, so let's scroll up. I'll take this one. You schedule where to save the log files.
What I'm asking you is where do you back up and store your backups?
I back up to folder, and then I FTP it to my hard drive.
So the folder's on the server,
Folder's on the server.
and then you have to bring it down to your computer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't only back up to a folder though, because what happens if the whole server crashes? Redundancy is the key. So you want to have an offsite location too.
So a cloud like Dropbox.
Back it up to Dropbox. Back it up to an S3 service, or back it up to a folder and copy it to your hard drive.
Okay.
But yeah, look, hosting companies go out of business with no warning. Okay, for the DB backup, tables to backup, click all. Don't worry about what's in the list, just click all.
Yeah, that's useful.
Yeah, I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't want to back up all. It defaults to your current WordPress installation, but many people back up multiple WordPress installations off of the same database with different, see here I've got WP3 underscore something, and I've got WP underscore something, which is all before WordPress 3 multi-site, so that's like ancient. But I've also got other installations on here. Back up all. Backup file compression, you want to compress it always. Okay, I'm running multi-site with a bunch of different sites on there. For me, I would need all. Files, this is where you'd specify I want to back up the files that are not WordPress related, like all this stuff in the root folder. You can also tell it to back up or not back up your uploads and your images. And you just go through there and, literally decide each one. Do I want to back up this folder? Right here it says exclude. Yeah, I want to exclude all those. Backup plugins. I recommend that you back up the list of plugins. It's okay to do a zip of it. To folder, again, you'd specify that full name on your site right here for where to store those backups. Okay, I think I've quickly covered everything. Big questions? All right.
So basically, we should do this, just like you said, and then if we're in trouble, call you.
Yes.
If we need it to store it.
And I'm going to take everything that I covered, plus the stuff that I hadn't thought of to cover, like all the questions that were asked, and I'm going to put it up on this website, this one here, including all the screen captures and screenshots and the explanations of why I've started that. I haven't finished it. So that'll be all up there, so don't worry about it if you didn't get perfect notes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. This was almost, I kind of feel bad for George because he covered so much in this plugin review that was not just the plugin. And so it made me think about, I think a possible topic for a future meetup might be the mechanics of the backup, the mechanics of how to back up. And some of these larger questions you were asking were not specific to the plugin, but they're about like, what do you need to think of when you back up? So I just wrote down that as a possibility on the list because it's such a critical thing to have a good, solid backup. So we'll look for that after the new year. We're scheduled all the way out through December, but probably in the new year we'll look at something like that. All right?
Quick version of backups, of what backups to keep. Until you know a good schedule, like one of us technical people has walked you through it, keep all your past backups.
All right, so our next presenter is Ita Udaimo, and do I say that right, Ita? I always say you're just your first name.
Close.
Close enough. All right, good job. So Ita is actually a good friend of mine, fellow gangplanker here, and Ita runs a company called A View from Above, and he does video. And the minute one of my clients needs video, I pull in Ita because I do not want to get into that. He does it. Ita actually has a degree in computer animation, and he can make video scene. He can also, it's funny, you can cover so many mistakes when shooting. Like you can give him some video, he's like, oh, I can help that out a little bit. You know, and so he does some magic with some of his post-processing. So if you ever are looking at your video needs, Ita will be really good. He's gonna talk today about just best practices. Like what do we need to think about when we're using video on our websites? All right.
Thank you very much, Carol. Hi, guys. How are we doing this evening?
Great.
A little click on here. All right. So yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about best practices in using video for the interwebs. So first off, let me just kind of get a show of hands. How many people are currently using video on their site? And how many people are looking to start using video on their site? Awesome. Okay. So let me start off with a little bit about me. As Carol said, my name is Ita Udoema, and I run a company called View from Above Entertainment. I started off my professional career, I guess you could say, in 96. Went to Purdue University and studied mechanical engineering for 3 years, and came to the realization that mechanical engineering was really, really boring. So actually, my intent was to work in special effects. I wanted to go work for Disney as an Imagineer and do animatronics, build robots and things like that. But my thermodynamics and my differential equations instructors thought better of it. So I decided to move back to Arizona, where I went to the Art Institute of Phoenix and got my first degree in computer animation. Figured if I can't do special effects physically, I can do them digitally. In 2003, I had an opportunity to work with some friends of mine, and we made our first feature film called Night of the Chihuahuas. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible little indie flick that it's about a bunch of mutant killer chihuahuas that overrun a small Arizona town.
That's actually true. What's going on over there?
So we did that and learned a lot from it. And we went on to make 2 more horror movies, one called Promise and one called The Lonely Ones. And at that point, I realized that I didn't want to make horror movies for the rest of my life. I wanted to create comedies and actions and do things like that. So I started my own company, View from Above. Around that time, I realized that if I'm going to be in show business, I should probably know a little bit about business. So I got my second degree in business administration at Ottawa University. And then in 2011, I was fortunately blessed with getting laid off from my day job. I've been saying for years and years that I was going to set aside some money and I'm going to get out of here. I hate this job. I want to start my own thing. And getting laid off, I had a nice little severance package, and that was the money that I used to start my business. Shortly thereafter, I started coming here to Gangplank, and I am now a mentor in video, and I'm also a part of the Gangplank Video or Studios initiative. So that's a quick overview about me. Now, the reason I tell you this is that my background is in storytelling. My background is in movie making and visual media. I'm not a web expert, but what I've found is that a lot of the principles translate over seamlessly. There's a clip that I'm going to show you at the very end that kind of speaks to this idea that everything, all media is merging together. So to start with, first thing I can tell you is that video is content. The most common request that I get from clients is, hey, I need video for my website. I want a video to launch a product. I want a video for this brand new site. And the most common question I get asked is, well, how long should the video be? The best practice that I can give you here is that the idea of creating a single video is not necessary. You can create multiple videos based around the same concept. So if you're trying to squeeze your entire product or your entire concept of your company into a little 4-minute video, some things are going to get lost. But if you approach it with a content strategy approach where I'm going to break it up into 4, 5, 6 videos, think of it like a video miniseries. You're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. And speaking as a video producer, it's just as easy for me to make 5 as it is to make 1 if I know that from the beginning. So having it, intentionally going in with multiple videos is really to your advantage. Another point to that is that if you break your story up into pieces, you're creating multiple touch points. Rather than having just one video that a person can watch, you have now 5 videos, and you have a way to engage with your audience. How many of you guys watch videos online? Right, pretty much everybody. Typically, about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, is that about right? If you're gonna watch a video? Probably aren't gonna watch an hour-long video, right? I know I do this, I'm quite sure that all of you do this. I won't sit and watch a 30-minute video. I will, however, sit and watch 10 3-minute videos back to back to back to back to back, right? So the idea of trying to cram your entire message into one video is not nearly as effective as spreading it out over a series of videos and always pointing back to the source. So with that said, substance over style. This is a ComScore study done back in 2012, and it basically compares professionally produced content against user-generated content. The difference being professionally generated content is something that I would create for you. User-generated content is something that you would do on your own, whether, with whatever setup you have, whether it's your webcam or if it's a small studio setup. And essentially what they found was that using professionally produced content helps simplify complicated concepts. So it does a better job of delivering your message. User-generated content does a better job of creating trust and building bonds. By using the two together, it's a much more powerful combination than using one or the other. So when I talk to a lot of people, I tell them to envision your content strategy or your video strategy. Use the highly produced videos as tentpoles for specific events, for new product launches, and those kinds of things. But to keep things regularly updated, you can create those videos on your own. There's nothing wrong with that. We as viewers actually are very, very much okay with simplified videos if it's consistent and on a regular basis. So for the big events, do something really nice and polished. And then for, just like you would do a blog, you can create videos on your own and just crank them out as many and as fast as possible. Authenticity is the key. That's really what it's about. Again, the user-generated content builds trust. I try to encourage all of my clients, if they're making a video about their product or their service, that they should be the ones that are in it. They shouldn't go get a spokesperson unless there's certain exterior factors. Like I've got a client right now, it's a mother and daughter team, and they're both from Poland. So they have thick Polish accents. Not ideal for video, so we're gonna work around it. But whenever possible, you should be the person that's in your video. Nobody knows more about your product than you do. Relax. You have to breathe. You don't want to be stiff. The world's not going to come crumbling down if you make mistakes. Mistakes are okay. Again, it breeds that. It breeds trust. It makes you a real person, not some corporate, not some company spokesperson or puppet. So essentially, you don't want to be this guy.
Are you tired of lying around in bed all day with nothing to do, where you never need get up and get? Because in 6 short weeks, I can train you to be a high-paying hoe. That's right. It's a known fact that a good hoe can make up to $1,500 a week. Just think, $1,500 a week without even leaving the comforts of your own bedroom. Sounds too good to be true? Just think for my new book entitled, I Want to Be a Hoe. And in 6 short weeks, you're not confident that you can make big money as a hoe working for me. Just send the books back for a full refund. It's that
travel, wear nice clothes, make money, and have lots and lots of sex. What more could a woman ask for?
Rush 1995 to be a hoe. 800 New York, New York, 99999.
Be somebody. Be a hoe.
I love using that clip for no other reason than it's just really funny to me. But I think there's also some value in that. If you are so obsessed with being quote unquote professional and being quote unquote perfect, you are going to come off like he does in the beginning. Hi, are you interested in developing a new website for your, it comes off really rough. So you want to just relax. It's okay if you make mistakes. We accept those. So that's something to keep in mind if you're going down the route and you're creating videos on your own. Okay. Keep losing my mouse. There it is. Okay. So moving on to video platforms. There are a whole slew of video platforms out there that you can use. I know, in fact, given the audience here, I know you can, theoretically, you can post your videos directly on WordPress. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but there are a couple of reasons you don't want to do that. It slows your site down, and it creates a lot of extra work when you could just as easily use an exterior video platform. So, like I said, there's like Flow Player and JW Player, Viddler, Vimeo, Wistia, and from my experience and my observation, all of these are just delivery systems, and for all intents and purposes, they're pretty much the same. You can use each of them has special functionalities that do make sense if you're going to use them. For example, Vimeo is their biggest claim to fame basically is that they don't re-encode your footage. So if you upload a video, the way you see it is the way Vimeo is going to play it. And that can be very useful for most people. I would argue that depending on what your content is, it may or may not be important, because because of the different platforms and places people are watching it, it's not going to really matter if you've got the most crisp, beautiful picture on a very small little Android phone. No one's going to notice the difference anyway. So then I think Viddler and Vimeo both allow you to create paywalls or create private content. Also very useful. Wistia is a new one that I'm just now learning about. They've got a great analytics, and they've got heat maps attached to their players. So they're all good choices. There's not one that's right or one that's wrong. You really have to figure out what feature or what functionality you need to decide which player you're going to use. But it's also important to remember the granddaddy of them all. Yes, YouTube. I separate YouTube out from the list, and this is something I've been researching a lot more lately, and there's a reason I separated it. The others are delivery systems. They're video platforms. YouTube is a lot more than that. For those who don't know, YouTube is owned by Google, which is kind of a big deal. It is the second largest search engine in the world, second only to Google. They've got a deep integration with Google+, which is owned by Google. And it's really, what makes YouTube different is that it's a fully fledged social media platform. The others, people don't typically, or at least in my experience, people don't just go surf Vimeo. People don't just go hang out on Wistia. Those are so that you can put your video, those platforms are so that you can put your video someplace. YouTube is a place where people go and where they hang out. So much so, in fact, the reason why you need to really take a look at YouTube and not just post content there as a video platform, but as a hub or as an extension of your website. This is some statistics I pulled from my YouTube channel. In the last year, 79% of all the videos that I've had up, 79% have been watched on the YouTube watch page. So regardless of where I embedded it, whether I put it on whether I put it on Facebook or Google Plus or on my website, people were watching it on YouTube more than any place else. So it's important to set up your YouTube channel and set up your uploads appropriately. far too often I see people who they just upload to YouTube and they don't bother putting in descriptions or headlines or anything. They just put it up there so that they can embed it someplace else. Well, you want to put in those details. So what are those details? I'm glad you asked. So here are just a few of them. Once you've uploaded uploaded to YouTube, we're not going to really get into setting up your channel. That's a whole nother conversation. But you want to make sure that you put in a title for your video. Again, you don't want to just upload the video as mt3971.mp4. You want to actually put in a title. Even better than also an extension of that, as you're uploading. Now, I'm still not sure how accurate this is, but when you upload your file, you also want to name the file appropriately. So again, instead of mt39p21.mp4, you should call it how to maximize plugins on WordPress.mp4. Make sure that's the file name before you upload it, and then upload it and put in the correct title. If you're just getting started and you don't have an established brand, it's a good idea to put your brand name at the end of every title. Within the description, you have the ability to put in hyperlinks. So once I think it's the first 3 lines, YouTube and by extension Google indexes the first 3 lines of your description, and then from there you can put in a variety of links, which gives the viewer an opportunity to link back to your website, link to your Facebook. Typically, I'll put in, as a standard link nomenclature, I have my website, my Facebook page, my Twitter, and my Google+. When you're putting in the links, you do need to make sure that you put in the HTTP : before it, so that they'll turn into active links. Then you also want to make sure that you're putting in good tags. Metadata is always good. So make sure that you tag what your video is about, both narrowly and broadly. So you want to be very specific, but you also want to throw broad keywords in there as well. Because again, you're going to start cross-referencing and cross-linking with other videos, with your own videos, and you want to make sure that that you can be found. And then the last thing is you want to respond to people. If someone comments on your video, you want to send them a response. Thank them for watching. Let them know, this is a place to start a dialogue, start creating engagement. So with that, let me ask you guys, what would you suppose is what are some analytics that you think are important for a video?
How long was watched?
At what point the watch stops happening? Like the drop off watch point?
So there's a lot of little buttons and things over there you can like. You can like and share and view and thumbs up all day long. Watch time. Now that YouTube has recalibrated their algorithm, watch time is the most important analytic, period. Now, if people share it, then more people have an opportunity to watch it. That's good. But ultimately, it comes back to driving up watch time. So you want to make good content. You want to try to keep people engaged as long as possible. And from that, your videos will rank higher. Yes?
Do you know if it measures if people skip ahead?
Yes, it does.
It does?
It does.
Okay.
So what you'll see is there's a metric called audience retention. And basically it gives you a line, basically. Depending on which version you're looking at, it'll either go up and down or it'll just be over time. If you see in the analytics where it drops off, but then it jumps back up again, it's probably because people are skipping to that point and watching from that point forward. So, cool. So I had mentioned earlier, because I want to share this quick clip with you guys before I open it up to questions, but like I said, more and more, whether it's TV or movies or web series, everything is starting to blend together. And when people ask me about watch time, or they ask me about how long should my video run, I always think about this video clip. Essentially, the argument is that the standard answer is that videos should be around 4 minutes. I think the average for YouTube was 4 minutes, 11 seconds the last time I checked. And people adhere to that so religiously. And the argument is that people have shorter attention spans. I think this is an interesting clip that might kind of realign that perception.
Careers are made, salaries increase, people have reputations and track records to protect. And the end result is a shift toward conservatism, away from risk-taking. And if there's one thing that overlaps between business and art, it's that in the long run, the risk-takers are rewarded. And one way that our industry might fail to adapt to the continually shifting sands is to keep a dogmatic differentiation in their minds between the various media, separating film, TV, miniseries, webisodes, or however you want to label these narrative formats. It's like when I'm working in front of a camera, that camera doesn't know it's a film camera or a TV camera or a streaming camera, it's just a camera. So I predict that in the next decade or two, any differentiation between these platforms will fall away. Is 13 hours watched as one cinematic whole really any different than a film? Do we define film as being something 2 hours or less? Surely it goes deeper than that. If you're watching a film on your television, is it no longer a film because you're not watching it in the theater? If you watch TV show on your iPad, is it no longer a TV show? The device and the length are irrelevant. The labels are useless, except perhaps to agents and managers and lawyers who use these labels to conduct business deals. But for kids growing up now, there's no difference. Watching Avatar on an iPad or watching YouTube on a TV or watching Game of Thrones on their computer. It's all content. It's just story. To say nothing of the audience's attention span. I mean, for years, particularly with the advent of the internet, there's people griping about, lessening attention spans. But if someone can watch an entire season of a TV series in one day, doesn't that show an incredible attention span? Because when the story is good enough, people can watch something 3 times the length of an opera. What'd you do last weekend?
So yeah, at the end of the day, it all comes back to the story, and it comes back to what do you have to say. Bit rates and formats and cameras and all of these other details, those are just details. It's figuring out what you want to say and how best to craft your story, craft your message. That's the most important and the best practice in using video. It's figuring out who do you want to talk to and what do you want to tell them. So with that, questions? Yes.
What's your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel? My YouTube channel, if you go to, actually, the best way to get to it is to go to my website. If you go to viewfromabove.net, there's a nice big link to my YouTube channel. I was, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I was an early adopter for YouTube, so I don't have a vanity,
and you
URL.
can customize once it's set up? Or you don't want to?
At this point, I don't think I want to. Okay. I'm afraid to mess with it. I'm like, I've been doing it. I've got everything just so. I don't want to change. I'm afraid to change something. But okay, you have to teach me how to do that then. Like I say, I make the content. The web stuff, that's a little tricky.
It ain't broke, so don't fix it.
Right. Viewfromabove.net. No punctuation.
Okay, so just hit that YouTube icon.
Yeah. Oh, actually, here, I'll pull it up for you.
Sure.
Yeah. should be an interesting trick. So I do this kind of backwards. Oh, that's Google. That's the Google Plus.
How important is making a good channel name, and how important is to have a channel for one audience or one topic, and make a separate channel for a different topic?
I've heard arguments for the idea of creating different channels for different topics. I personally, I like to use playlists for that. If you have one master brand and you have different topics that fall under it, to me, it makes more sense to break it up into playlists, so that everything still comes back into one place, and it's one less thing to manage. Trying to manage multiple channels can start getting pretty hairy. But I think it depends on the scale of your brand. So for example, like I've got my little video blog here, and then I've got a separate playlist for recent work, all of my little After Effects work, and then the different web series that I personally produce. And I still want them all coming back to me. In the case of, for example, like the Blue Way Talk Show, we did the first season, I kept that under my brand, but as we were growing, we decided, you know what, now let's split it off. And so we split it off into a separate channel, and I just embedded this playlist onto that channel. And because we're basically collaborating, we still push traffic back and forth to each other. Yes?
Isn't your YouTube channel View from Above? Isn't that the name of it?
Yes.
Okay, so when you said that you didn't want to change something, I don't know.
Oh, no, so the URL up here, if you were to type it in, it's my handle. So if you were to type it in, it's www.youtube.com/deacon8791, as opposed to being the URL being .com/.
But you could go into YouTube and just type in View from Above, and you would come up.
Yes. Yes, you could. Yes.
I was just actually looking at Vimeo today. I've been posting everything on YouTube for quite a long time, but I just opened an account on Vimeo because I want to put some password protected content up there. But in looking at all of this, I'm just like, I mean, once something's out there, it's pretty, I don't even know if you can protect anything anymore. But I'm just wondering, even if something's password protected, are there ways to protect it so that, I mean, people will go there to see it, the password. But beyond that, are there any ways to actually, software or whatever, I don't know, to protect things so that they can be, you know, I deselected anyone who downloaded it.
Right.
But is that an issue? Or?
That's probably the closest you're going to get to it. Is Vimeo is great for that. If you need something password protected, whether you're doing a course or you have special content that you want to keep walled off, and what I think is a great bit of irony, one of the people that I follow, his name's Tim Schmoyer, and he's got a great channel called Video Creators, and he specializes in teaching people how to build an audience on YouTube. And he's created this course, how to go from 1 to 10,000 subscribers in 12 months on YouTube, and it's hosted on Vimeo. because it's a paid course, he wants to protect it. But he does all the promotional videos and things like that on YouTube. So even if you are going to use a separate site, doing teasers and doing little extra bits of information and putting those on YouTube, that's good too. But yeah, if somebody really, really wants it, they can get it no matter what. I mean, if you really wanted to get somebody's video, you could just do a screen capture of it. while it's playing, right? But most people aren't going to do that, and I can't imagine that anybody has content that is so sensitive that I would go through that much trouble to try to get it. So
even the DVD industry can't keep people from copying the DVDs.
pretty much, yeah. So.
What about the opposite direction? How often do you put like your name or your brand showing on the video? Do you have like your logo showing behind you as you're talking?
I do that for, yes, I do. So I'll do it one of two ways. I'll either do what's called a branding bug, which is kind of like this here, or in the case of some other videos, I will, so for something like this, I'm working with Greg Taylor. You guys may know him. Oh, that's loud.
Hi, my name is Greg Taylor, and
So
I'm the founder of
in the background, I've got his logo.
WordPress is a goal-oriented
So I'll do-
web development
Yep.
company that specializes
So we did a
in
green
WordPress
screen shoot,
platform.
and I just put it
We
right back
use
there.
our
I think,
data-driven development technique to make sure that what we're doing
and this is
actually
another
solves.
one. A little bit different.
I'm Zacharian. Juana Smith. I'm just so thankful, you know, that I get to be here in Austin. I get to be here
Yeah, so
with
I'll
all
put a
my
little branding
friends. The
bug
first
down.
time I dropped into Real X Games Mega
One or
was
the
the
other.
first time I went to LA. I just stay calm in my head and I just say, don't die.
Part of the reason I do that, one, I think it makes it look a little bit nicer, makes it look a little bit cleaner, but it also kind of protects my content, because if somebody wants to copy it, they got to crop that out. So that just adds one more thing for them to have to deal with. So I use the Adobe Creative Suite. My specialty is in compositing and After Effects work, but as a result, I learned how to use Premiere and Audition and a bunch of the others.
See my client up there? Samara,
What's that?
on the side, the work that you did for them.
Samira
Water.
Oh, yeah. You had a question?
Oh, I was just going to ask, what's the status of the room next door, and how does that fit in with Gameplay Studios?
So the space next door is in constant flux, but it's slowly moving forward. I wish I could tell you that I had a timeline, but with the rain and everything, we've had quite a bit of problems. That said, once everything's done, we're going to have the studio set up in the back, where we'll have lights, tripods, and all the core elements preset, set up so that people who have knowledge can come in and use it. We also got a camera and microphones, which you are welcome to use once you've been trained on it. Essentially, we have what's called a certified producer program. So either you can become a certified producer, or you have to have a certified producer present there just to make sure that if you run into any problems, you don't start flipping switches, because some of the gear is kind of expensive. So in the interim, we actually use the podcast room, and the video I showed with Greg was shot in the library. So we've got two big green walls, and
So that's going to be for video?
yeah, for video, music, and audio. Oh, yes. And as a matter of fact, we're having an open house on, when is it?
November 6th.
On November 6th. So
Studios.
for studios. Yeah.
Will there be a cost for getting certified as a producer?
Nope. Well, not money. So the cost, much like, for those who aren't familiar with it, the way that we work here in Gangplank is we work with social capital. So what we would ask is that you be willing to volunteer, for example. If you're trained on using the equipment, when we have big events and things like that, be able to come in and run the camera if I'm not available to do it. Things like that. That's all we ask. And if somebody else needs help, be willing to help them.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you work with pre-done? That reminds me, because I'm from California. And California used to have, in Los Angeles, they had these nonprofit studios that you could go to and put on, what do they call it? that nonprofit TV.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Anyway, I did a show about 20 years ago that, where I was doing a talk show.
Mhm.
And I still have all the VHS tapes for it, and I keep thinking it needs to be converted, but they're half-hour segments of VHS. They need to be converted over to either DVD or into like uploaded online. I think I have one that's like a snippet for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, there's a couple places to do it. You'll want to get it on a hard drive, not on DVDs. DVDs will be gone in 5 years. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to take it from VHS.
Take it from VHS and just have them digitize it onto a hard drive.
Digitize it onto a hard drive.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
For those who don't know, Lisa also does a meetup called the Digital Storytellers Meetup. What's the date? When is that?
It is the second and fourth Monday of the month. So we just had one this week.
Okay.
So not next week, but the week after.
So if you're interested in his meetup, the Digital Storytellers Meetup, that's a great group to get involved with. All right, so as we get Joe going, we're actually I was worried we weren't going to have enough content. We're going a little bit late, so we want to go quickly into the next segment. But while he's getting started, we usually do tips, tricks, needs, and wants right here. But the needs and wants oftentimes take a little bit longer. So because we're short on time, let's just do tips and tricks. Anyone have anything that they found useful the past month that they want to share? Plugin, process, anything like that. That's just, this is so cool.
What is, I'm sorry.
Tips, tricks.
Okay.
Anything that you
want to share? I have something to share. I told you I did that WP, it's Manage WP, and you can sign up to transfer your WordPress site from one place to another.
All right, Manage WP, helping with migrations from one site to another.
Right.
Awesome.
But you can also sign up, and then it will manage like multiple sites for you. There's
Yes.
a lot of other stuff that it does.
Is this a plugin or what do you call it?
It's a service.
Manage WP has a plugin, but it's a service.
Right.
So you install a plugin on each site you want to manage, and then you use their service. There's it's paid. There may be a free version. Did you use free?
Yeah, I did. What I did for
Like Infinite WP, similar to
what I
Infinite
did for
WP.
the migration is free because you can do that for as many times as you need to. If you decide you want to manage multiple sites, then it is. I don't remember how much it was, but it didn't look like it was like a deal killer. It looked like it was very doable if you have several sites you want to do. And like I said, I used it. It was my first time using it, and it worked great.
There are a couple of other services out there. Infinite WP is another one that's very similar to Managed WP. And then iThemes has a product they call Seek. And that's probably the newest one on the market right now. So, excellent. No, Sync you pay. Well, if you have a backup buddy or any kind of iThemes account, you can get Sync for up to 10 sites, I believe.
Okay.
But anything over that, you have to pay.
And so that's managing multiple sites.
Yeah, Sync is very much like Managed WP.
Okay.
Any other tips, tricks? I found a really cool plugin called Stream. Anyone heard of Stream? So if you've got multiple people working in a website and you're not sure who made that last change, Stream actually works to log all of the changes on your site. So let's say you have 3 or 4 people who's like, oh, what happened? Something broke. A plugin broke or something. You can go back and see what has been happening and who has done what. And the most recent update, when we first discovered Stream, it was great, but it wasn't including Gravity Forms. And we use Gravity Forms to a very high degree on several of our sites. And so it was like helpful, but not, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in Gravity Forms. The most recent update now includes Gravity Forms. So Stream is a really nice plugin. We only use the free version. There is a paid version too, but we've found the free version to be plenty. Any other tips?
Well, I was just saying, when you do a site, do you have some like basic plugins that you install on all your sites?
Pretty much, and I think that would be different for everyone has their own little favorites. that would be a great, I think, more of an interactive topic that would be a good time to share.
And the other thing about that is like, well, do you just do it through trial and error, or hey, your friend told you to use this plugin or use this or that? I mean,
a little of all.
Okay.
And this group.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, a little bit of it all. I'll Google search, try it. Oh, that broke something. Not using that one again.
Right. So it's time consuming.
Yep.
Until you kind of.
And then you get circles, and then you kind of like, again, you come to the groups, you find out what other people are using. So yeah. All right. So I have to give props to Joe. We had a speaker lined up for this month who was going to talk a little bit about using WordPress as a CRM, a customer relations management program. He had a family emergency and was unable to present this month. And so Joe, I think it was, 2 nights ago? I'm saying, okay guys, I need a topic, anyone? Ferris, Bueller, anyone? And finally Joe says, well, I don't have anything, but I'll put together something in 2 days. Oh my gosh, thank you. So anyway, Joe is going to run through just some basic troubleshooting, just kind of higher level, how to think about. So think about things and where to go when you're trying to figure something out. So be very kind to him because he saved my bacon.
All right, how's this? All right. Thank you, guys. So what my topic here is today is on troubleshooting with WordPress. It's not isolated to WordPress. You're going to find that the topics I'll share about and the points I'll share are not applicable only to WordPress. It could be anything in technology. It could even be your own car. So the way you should be thinking about this is kind of just approach it with an open mind, even if there's some technical topics. Even if you don't really do all this every day, that's completely fine, and hopefully it'll give you some tools and some resources to approach your next technical challenge with WordPress. So the reality, and this is like my premise here, is that WordPress is natively technical. Out of the box, it is technical. A lot of hosting services have made it easier to use with sort of like one-click installs and stuff like that. But even those one-click installs are doing technical things. It's setting up a database, it's setting up all your files, it's setting up your permissions. Some of them preload in WordPress themes, some of them even preload in plugins. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes whenever you do like a one-click install or you use a service like Pagely or WP Engine or something. But the reality is that all of us, by default, are not that technical. So people are not as technical as WordPress itself. So what that creates is this sort of chasm between there's users who use WordPress and definitely want to create content and express themselves, but the system they're doing it on is pretty technical, and it does require some understanding of really just internet technologies and how they work. The great news is that WordPress overall has become much more reliable over the years, even just over the months in recent releases. So users don't have to do this a lot. However, all of us here, even the pros and the technical people here, have once faced a tragic issue with a WordPress site, and they were in panic mode, and they had to go figure it out, on the fly. And that's normal. So what I'm sharing is just kind of what I've learned over the years in managing and working with WordPress over time. So the other aspect of my premise is that you probably don't care about all the minutia of WordPress. You don't care about CDNs or DNS or anything else like that. You really just want to log into WordPress and make it work. And the recent developments in WordPress around like the media gallery and stuff like that has definitely improved. So they're definitely going in that direction of making it easier. So while I do recommend, if you ever have time to understand these topics more in depth, you really don't have to be able to benefit from using WordPress. And that, I believe, is the mission that is carried out by the WordPress Foundation and Matt Mullen-Webb and so forth, is to make sure that people at the end of the day don't have to care about this. So, and basically so they're in a position to be able to express themselves freely, be able to use video, be able to use text, do it from the phone, effortlessly without worrying about all the minutia behind the scenes. So, like I said, I think you want it to work. Reality is, unfortunately, it's not always that easy. We all run into problems. It's not isolated to any one hosting provider or one particular setup or one particular theme. It's really an underlying issue in just how, like what I said earlier, is that WordPress in general is pretty technical, and the users are not always as technical as WordPress requires. So, like I said, problems happen, but luckily, we have a lot of other engineers and smart people to help solve those problems. So even if you're having trouble with your WordPress site, you don't necessarily need to know how to fix it. You just need to know the resources to find where those people who can fix it, where they're located, or be able to follow tutorials written by someone else that has probably experienced the same thing that you have. So the rest of this presentation is going to really kind of talk about a few different topics. Obviously, introduction to why troubleshooting in itself is important. How to react whenever you do have a technical issue, even on our production website. We'll get into AP, TSN, DP in a second. WordPress architecture, just a quick overview, literally like a 30,000-foot view of what's going on behind the scenes in a typical WordPress site. It doesn't apply to everyone, but for most people, this is what you should be looking at and thinking about whenever you do have a technical issue. I'll also make it very practical of how this actually benefits you, and then hopefully some tips to help you win the next WordPress challenge. I look at it as a challenge. It's never a failure. At the end of the day, it's just bytes on a screen. It's words on a screen. If it goes down, it's a blank screen. It'll come back later. But obviously, if it's a production site and it's generating income and revenue, you should probably have some resources to maintain that. So moving forward, so why troubleshooting matters. So long before I worked at Infusionsoft, I worked for AOL, and not AOL necessarily in Virginia. This is in Tucson when I was doing tech support. And the beauty of working for AOL tech support, and yes, say what you want to say about AOL, is that you have to explain technical topics to the lowest common denominator. Really basic things, such as plugging in a phone line to a wall. And for instance, people might call in with an issue saying, I can't sign on. That's the technical driver for the call. But what you actually have to do, you have to, through deduction, you have to figure out, all right, what is this person even using? Sometimes they could say they can't connect, and they're using like a mobile phone, and they can't connect to the webmail, or they can't connect to the client software, and they don't have their internet plugged in. So with proper diagnosis, you're able to save what could be an hour-and-a-half call, which does happen sometimes, into really a 4 or 5 minute call. And the customer doesn't feel stupid for going through all this effort just to kind of do one task of, oh, whoops, I hit the switch on my cable modem. So that's a lesson that I think we can all take. I know a lot of WordPress is typically focused around the themes and the function styles and plugins and stuff. But it could also be some other technical issues that we might experience are not always that technical. It could be something basic. The other example is just with your car. If you drop your car off at an auto mechanic, I always recommend, if you're really not sure what the issue is, invest in the $30 diagnostic. Because a $30 diagnostic or whatever that they might charge will save you probably thousands instead of just throwing fixes at a car. What could be a transmission issue could actually just be an electronic solenoid issue. So, and that's a $40 part, and the other is $2,500. So it does pay off to do good, proper diagnostics, not just online, but also in real life. The other reality here is that, especially with WordPress, curiosity doesn't kill you. It's okay to break things and try things out and learn. I could speak for myself in the sense that, yes, I always Googled and found some resources out there, but I would just try it myself. I would literally try, what if I didn't put a semicolon in this file, what would happen? And then be able to go through the process to figure out where that issue was. Now, I know that's not practical for everyone, but if you ever find a chance to, maybe a Saturday morning sometime, and not on a critical site for yourself or clients or anything, is to just try it out. Mark did a really good job of, he has a separate site for testing and whatnot. You could have separate websites for testing and just try things out. And that's how you figure out kind of what's going on behind the scenes. And worst case scenario, you can delete it and start over. That's the beauty of WordPress.
So,
yeah.
can you just talk about a little bit more about that development side or to have a site that's for testing?
Right.
What that means?
In a nutshell, when I say testing website, it's just another version of, like another copy of WordPress installed onto another server. So for instance, like another URL, basically.
From a subject, just install another one. Okay.
Right, so if it's like jomana.com, I could have jomana.com/test and then drop WordPress in there.
Okay, so the URL for that would be that
Yeah.
test site.
Yeah.
And you just use that because nobody's going to find it.
And you don't publish it.
Yeah, you can actually have the setting where, you know, robots files turned off, or you can do more advanced, you know, something called HT access
Okay,
to be able to
But if
block it
you're
out.
testing something, then don't you still have to transfer it back over to your regular site in order to?
And that's where something called staging comes into play. With a service called like WP Engine and a few others out there, offer a service called staging. So the testing website is connected to a production website, and you could pretty easily just transfer it.
Okay. Otherwise, it's more complicated.
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, it's going through the whole backup process. It's doing stuff like that. For most people, it's okay to just have a subdirectory. When I say test, I'm really meaning the word learn. To just learn the innards of WordPress and just try things out. But for testing purposes, again, in like a business environment, you definitely want to use a separate server just in case things go awry. Other than that, like I said, why troubleshooting matters is that for any technical issue, if my site was throwing, a blank WordPress page, which happens a lot, or 500 error, or all my images were not showing, I'm able to approach that with a degree of confidence, and it lowers my fear in trying to approach and diagnose the problem. So in the future iterations of WordPress or future technologies you'll work with, it's able to help me through that process. So I can fix things relatively quickly. And that's the benefit that you can also experience when you go through and you try a few things. I'll get into it a little bit later, but there's actually been some recent changes with a service called Cloudflare, where all this troubleshooting stuff came right into play. So how you should react to a technical issue is probably to start screaming and panicking, right? No. So the first thing to do is just to stay calm. It's completely possible on the internet that a website did not render a page for that, that nanosecond that you hit to your website. And it wasn't reproducible in any way. And you could just look at that and just start freaking out. We've all done it. But then when you hit reload, it's okay. As long as it's not a chronic problem, you should be all right. But it's always good to stay calm at the first sign of things not working right. So like I said, so you should stay calm and try to reproduce the issue. That's a #1 thing. Some people find an error on their website and they just stop right there. And they contact their web host or they contact their IT person, and they're freaking out. And then we've all heard this line before: "It works for me, not you." That is an element of troubleshooting that the other person's trying to reproduce. So as long as you can reproduce it consistently under certain conditions, then it's okay. It is a problem, it needs to be fixed. But if no one else can reproduce it, it's unlikely a problem with the website. It could be a problem with the computer or other things. If you're in a company, at this point, now that you've reproduced the problem, you should probably document it. Document everything from your browser version to what kind of internet connection you have. Sometimes people might not be able to, you might not be able to access your own website from the airport because you're on the airport's Wi-Fi. It's possible that could happen. But just document the situation, provide some technical details, which will come into play later. Screenshots. I forget her name. Is it Alexis or Andrea? Right next to you.
Oh, Alexandra.
Alexandra, thank you. She actually came here today with screenshots printed on a paper. Like, that's a really good example. If you're going in for somewhere for tech support, or you're working with a WordPress consultant and you're having a technical issue and you can't really communicate it, articulate it very clearly, that's okay. Screenshots are basically evidence, and it's a way for someone to say, okay, I see what you're working on. So that's very good. But if it's not printing it on a paper and walking into a WordPress meetup, it's always good, like if you're working with a developer, take a screenshot, and we can explain that in a second, but take a little picture of your screen somehow and email it to the developer, and they can see what you're working on, and they can see your browser and all the good stuff. Throughout this whole process, whatever you're trying to reproduce, like I said, it goes along with staying calm, but it's being fact-driven. Not, oh my God, this is horrible day. This person doesn't ever respond to my emails or calls. They probably hacked my site. It's probably not that dire, and it's probably not that accurate of an assessment. You got to be fact-driven, as if you're a third party investigating whatever technical issue you have. So always try to gather facts. The facts are you're using Firefox version 32. You have Flash installed, and you might have a little search bar attached to your browser. The other fact could be, hey, you updated to WordPress 4.0 yesterday, and now all of a sudden these issues are happening today. That is a relevant fact when you're trying to diagnose a WordPress issue. It's not that easy, but if you can, try to identify the causes, which we'll get into the next step here. But identify the causes and then attempt to fix for those causes. I know that's obvious, but it's not about assigning blame or figuring out what happened. I like that one plugin stream that you were talking about because it does help you to identify the causes, also known as blame, if something goes wrong. Right, and it's also good to kind of figure out, oh, okay, it's actually this person. They were finagling in the WP settings. Well, I should probably lower their access, and it's a good way to be both proactive and reactive at the same time. And obviously confirm it works and doesn't have any side effects. It's possible that your website could be fixed, but there could be another problem that happens. For instance, you change your oil and all of a sudden your radiator starts leaking. It happens. Probably if you knock the hose or something like that. But the reality is just be fact-driven throughout the whole process. Stay calm. You'll always find a solution. And if not, you can always take more drastic measures to make a resolution. All right. So now that we know how to react to technical issues, I'm going to share this cool thing called the OSI layers. So OSI layers it's from the Open Standards International. It comes from the other organization called ISO. It's kind of like it's a committee that makes standards for everything in the world today. So what this is a list of all the layers that occurs between my computer and like my email or my web address, of how it communicates from one server to another. Even though I'm not connected to Wi-Fi right now, I'm sorry, not connected to an Ethernet cable, I am using a Wi-Fi, and I is using a physical radio, to actually communicate to the wireless router, and the wireless router is connected to a modem. The modem's connected to a gateway over on the, I'm guessing, CenturyLink or Cox network. And then from there, it's just interconnections across the web. So I'll explain it briefly. So you start from the bottom up whenever you're trying to diagnose an issue, unless you know what you're doing and you realize you left a semicolon. You don't have to worry about the physical layer. But these are all layers. So an example, it goes physical, data link, network, transport, session, presentation, and application. There's a little phrase called all people seem to need data processing. It's the acronym for the names of the layers. So the way it works, just a very simple explanation for each one. So physical would be a cable, like literally a wire or a hard disk, where your data is stored. Data link is a connection to that. So it's, I'm trying to explain that. It's like a MAC address. Some of you have heard of that. It's like an identification of this device is interacting with this physical wire. Then there's a network, which is very common across the web. So for instance, if you've ever updated DNS for your website, bought a web domain, anything else like that, you're interfacing with the network layer. This actually kind of creates, it's the IP addressing and the subnetting of how computers are interconnected, both in a network in here, as well as a network outside of the world, outside of the building here. Transport layer is basically how large, medium-sized networks can connect to bigger networks. So for instance, I'm assuming we're connected here to Cox. It allows us to connect to not just this building, but to the neighborhood address, and that neighborhood address to connect to the larger Cox head end for the entire state. Not really a big deal. This does come into play later when you're trying to diagnose network issues. It's possible. It does happen once in a while, kind of like power outages. There's also various circumstances in the internet that cause this. If you've ever heard of denial of service attacks, various networks in the middle could be penetrated or really saturated with excess network activity, so they will drop out, and that could cause connectivity issues for users. The transport layer, I think, is it's really interrelated. It's as you unpack what they call a packet into a segment. Don't really worry about that, but it's another piece in the process. There's a thing called TCP or TCP/IP. If you ever heard of that on the computer? Also IPv6, IPv4 are all examples of the transport layer occurring. Not really something you have to worry about, but just know that it's occurring. So if you ever don't have an IP address, there's something going on there. Session, this is what opens and closes connections on the internet whenever you're trying to access a website. There's also the presentation layer. So an example of this, all right. So the session layer, I'll explain, is where HTTPS or SSL or TLS, all those technologies are occurring. It's a protocol that rewraps the data to make it more secure. So even if someone intercepted at a lower level here, the data going across, they would not see your connectivity. So if someone, if you're accessing a bank account right now, and I have tools on here to listen to what's going on over the air, HTTPS ensures that all I'm going to see is just gibberish. But if you weren't using HTTPS, I could actually see all your transactions. All banks, every major website that is e-commerce requires online security with HTTPS. But if you're having issues where your website cannot connect due to an SSL issue, it's nothing, or not likely, to be anything with WordPress itself. It could be with the SSL certificate or your DNS that's posted on your domain. And then finally, application is basically a web process. For instance, Apache, PHP, and WordPress are applications, and they're basically serving up a piece of content to the end user, but it's sitting on top of a file server that then does all this automatically. So the whole point of this is not to overwhelm you with all the minutiae in this, but just realize that at the physical layer, which is like your cable, like that goes in your computer, or the Wi-Fi that you're using, and it goes all the way up to basically the settings within WordPress. You probably, if you're having a major issue, start from the bottom up. It's much easier to diagnose because there's less work involved. For instance, if with a physical layer, if I'm having an issue connecting to my website, I can verify if I'm able to connect to other websites relatively easy. So I'm going to put all that in here. So the whole point of this, of using OSI layers, is to better diagnose and better understand the identifying causes for technical issues that you might come across. It simplifies and actually focuses your efforts. So instead of going at it through like sort of a very high stress, crazed, you're trying to diagnose everything all at once, you can just start in pieces. All right, so you verify your connection at your house is working. Okay, then you're no longer going to focus on that for the next step. Are you able to ping your server? Okay, good. You can ping it. That's a good thing. Are you able to connect to your server other ways? Okay, that's good. So you just keep progressing along up the OSI layers. I pulled that image right from Wikipedia, so you can actually just look up OSI layers in Google, and you can actually learn more about each of the different layers. The reason why it's a layer is because they really stack up on top of each other. So other than that, like I said, focus on the physical layers first, and then move upward to application when it comes to diagnosing a technical issue. And then this isn't only related to the internet and connecting to your website, although this is what the OSI layers are founded on. For instance, if you try to start your car and you realize it's not turning on, well, you're probably not going to check the tire pressure. You're going to check the battery, right? You start at the very basic thing of electricity. You see if your battery's working, okay, now, all right? And you're able to address that on the spot. All right, so let's talk a little bit about WordPress architecture. So I really broke it up into 4 segments just to make it simple. We'll get more technical in a second, but there are 4 really key areas you want to just think about when it comes to managing and diagnosing a WordPress site. Very simply, there's like your file server, your web server that it's hosted on. There are your plugins and themes or other customizations that you're using. There's obviously the content that you're putting into the server, for instance, blog posts, images, pages, links, etc. And there's ultimately the output. The way that WordPress creates things is it's not actually creating physical web pages on the server. That would both be a performance issue and also really hard to manage, from a backup perspective and stuff like that. What it's actually doing is that in most cases, for most pages that are created on WordPress, it's dynamically generated. So it's taking all these pieces, all these little bits of data from your database to your images and the settings in your theme and the settings in your plugin, and it's putting all that together to create what you find as a blog post. So the reason why I call that as a fourth category here, it's basically the end user output. Because something could go wrong in that process, and you want to be able to diagnose, okay, everything else in the other 4 areas are fine, the other 3 areas are fine. And you want to make sure that the output is rendering what you told it to output. A simple thing like this is, let's say, for instance, you have a CSS file that says link should be one color, and you want them to be another color. You're probably not going to be doing too much in the database or the file server to make that happen. You're going to focus your efforts into the themes portion of WordPress. So it's mainly just a concept to think about. So there's a variety of technical issues that can happen in any one of these areas. If you adhere to WordPress best practices, keeping things updated, using a decent host, managing the website, exploring on your own, looking at documentation, you generally don't have to worry about any of this because you'll just know it. It's in the back of your mind at all times. However, when you're in the middle of a crisis, you really don't have to dive in and take out where was Joe's slides on this. This won't really help you if you're in the middle of a crisis, but it'll help you just understand it as you keep progressing on. So this, I know it's very hard to see, so we're going to dive in a little bit more. But this is a 30,000-foot view of the actual innards of WordPress from really the file server standpoint, the database standpoint, and really the core of WordPress. When you say WordPress core, that centerpiece is the core. And then it kind of goes into more templates and then ultimately what the user outputs. So we're going to zoom in on this. So the back end of WordPress, and this is I think 90% of web servers are probably going to be using something called Linux to be serving up WordPress. Typically there's a file system. That means your hard disk on the system, the RAM on there, as well as the FTP. So you can transfer files to that web server, as well as SSH, so you can encrypt your connections when you're doing that. PHP is also in the back end. PHP is just a programming language that WordPress is built on. Just as Mark shared, there was an issue with that PHP update. PHP recently updated, I forget the exact version, I think it's like 5.3, where not all systems understand what PHP 5.3 is. So he did a good job of diagnosing it down to that. Sometimes it could be as simple as that, and it has nothing to do with your WordPress configuration. It's actual the server configuration. So that would be really applicable in the diagnostic process to be able to come to that conclusion and think of that as a possibility. PHP doesn't typically change a whole lot. Typically, it changes whenever there's security incidents. The other slide here is their database. I believe WordPress is built just for MySQL. There's probably a few other options out there. But if you have a database connectivity issue, or you ever went to a WordPress website and you see cannot connect to database, it means that database is being overloaded. There's really nothing that you can do, but stuff that your hosting provider can manage if you are having a lot of issues with that database, or you really can't connect to it at all. It could be their MySQL server went down. In most hosting environments, the database is not physically on the same server. It's on another server that it physically connects to in your data warehouse. So if it says cannot connect to database, it's possible that there actually is a network issue at your hosting provider. There's other causes for it, but just in a nutshell, that's possibly what could be going wrong here. Email and SMTP, one of my earlier talks went way in depth on that. But the nutshell, the takeaway on that is if you're not getting your email notifications from your WordPress configuration, such as lost passwords, there could be a number of causes for that relates to email. Typically, your web host will be able to guide you on diagnosing that further. Cron jobs, we talked about that with backups. So this is important to keep in mind. So even if, let's say your website is not that well trafficked, which is possible, most backup services are running off of something called WP cron. What cron is, I don't know the etymology on it, but the history, what my understanding is of cron is it's a process that's running on a server to run scheduled tasks, such as doing a backup or doing anything else in an automated, regular fashion on the web server. However, with WordPress, if no one's visiting your website, that cron process cannot run until someone visits your website again. So if you have lots of traffic, awesome. You can trust that your cron jobs will run properly. But if you have one page view a month and you have a backup process that's scheduled to run every week and no one else visits the website but you, then you need to find another way to trigger that. You can send automated traffic to your WordPress site if you needed to. But again, not a problem for most people, but it is a possibility. Why didn't this cron job fire? If you've ever scheduled a blog post to run or to get published in WordPress, it is possible that it won't get published because you'll skip the cron job time. And WordPress has a safety mechanism to not publish it if it's not sure of the time. So the solution for that is to make sure your site's always getting traffic. We're not going to explain all this, but the gist of it is that there's lots of little subcomponents that's going on into the core of WordPress. If you ever don't like it, you can also browse the source code. It's open source in the sense that you can just understand and see what little things are doing within the core of WordPress. There's all sorts of things from caching to managing your images to doing all that kind of stuff. It's literally right in the code. You don't even have to be a coder to understand it. Some of the stuff is somewhat well documented, so you can kind of see what's occurring and why. And you can examine the file structure to understand, why do I need a WP config? Or why do I need WP config sample? You don't need the sample, you just need WP config. But understanding some of that, you would only do it if you were searching the documentation. Anything could go wrong here, but most likely, for day-to-day uses and your website's already working, you shouldn't have any problems. If you are having a deeper issue, you've narrowed it down to, it's your XML RPC thing, you're able to isolate it to that one file. It's not one file of code. It's a series of files with code. So you're able to isolate at that level. Anything else really worth mentioning here? Not so much. Cool. Templates. You've probably seen this if you've ever edited your appearance or your theme settings, and you saw that there's all these little files there. Even if you edit your CSS file, you see another list of files on the right side of the screen. Well, all these files do different things within WordPress. It defines how your blog looks versus how a page looks versus how your index page looks, like your homepage. So if there's ever an issue with, not really with the core of WordPress, but with the display of how something is rendering on your website, it's probably because one of the template files is messed up, or you're doing something else with something called a functions file, which is used for dumping in all of your additional customizations. Not really a big deal here, but if there's something where it doesn't look right, but everything else is physically right on the screen, it's probably something with your style CSS file. If you're having issues where you go to your blog and it does an endless loop of just refreshing, there's probably something going on with your blog template that's occurring. More documentation on a WordPress site will explain all of this much further in the event you do have a problem with that. Yeah.
A lot of people use template and theme, like they use those two words interchangeably, but he's using them differently.
Yeah, this is physically what WordPress is looking for to be able to format a page. An example of this is if you're creating a post, and you'll see on the right side somewhere, you can choose a template. It's looking to be able to run that content through one of these files to make it look a certain way. So it's not a theme in that sense. It is just a physical sort of like.
Could be a part of that thing.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something like that bubble down and toothpicks.
Yes.
Every theme has different templates.
There's multiple templates that would make that.
What's this? That was a widget area within the whole template. Oh.
And if the theme that you're using doesn't have a particular template, it will search the default themes, and there's even more places that it can search to find a way to, okay, what do I do with this?
Yep, precisely. So it's useful for diagnosing really deep-seated issues that's occurring on your WordPress site in a nutshell. Depending on the theme that you're using, let's just say a thesis or a Genesis, framework, that framework is literally all this. So if there's something that's going on there, it'll probably tell you in an error message, or you'll be able to narrow it down accordingly, and then you can make those changes. Child and parent themes are a different topic I don't have time to get into, but it is definitely within this purview of templates that are on the server. And then finally, the end result is, what do people see? People who access your website, when they get to a blog post, they are curious, you might be wondering, like, how do all these settings relate to the blog post that people see? So in the end, they don't see any of the back end, typically. They shouldn't. What they do see is just HTML, CSS, and likely JavaScript. What that is just that's the rendering of a web page. If you've ever created a web page before, it's the same exact stuff. So if there's a problem with that, so if everything else is working right, and in the end, the pages that you're serving to people don't look right, or they're inconsistent, there could be something going on with a caching service, or you could be using something called Cloudflare, where it could be, it's no longer at your server's point of view, it's another issue in between the server producing the web page and the end user getting it. I can talk about this further if you'd like, but basically in a nutshell, whatever's going on in the front end of your website, if there's an error, you can take that error, but the user won't be able to do anything with it. Only you could if you had admin access to your site. Often, some errors are hidden. There's a little setting called WP debug that you could put into a WP config folder. Novices, I don't recommend this for, but definitely, there could be errors that are being suppressed, even though they're actually errors that are occurring, because WordPress typically doesn't like to show a lot of errors if something is occurring, unless it's a fatal error, like a major error that's occurring. So even if the user doesn't see a problem, there's ways that you can actually kind of scrape under the surface and see what's going on in the internals of WordPress. So what does all this do for you? The whole point of this is just so you can understand and at least communicate about the technical issues that you might be having. Though I don't have any clients on this, so I'm not complaining about anyone in full disclosure, the developers of your WordPress sites, if you're working with a developer, they really want you to give them as much detail as possible, even if it's long-winded. What they don't like chasing down is an issue that says, I can't connect to my website. There could be hundreds of possibilities for that. And connect to what? Is it the membership site? Is it the admin? Is it connected to the entire website? There's a variety of issues. So the whole point is details matter when it comes to diagnosing and resolving WordPress issues. If you want something to be fixed quickly, you should probably volunteer as much information as you can. It's okay to over-communicate to a support representative in that respect. And this isn't just your dedicated WordPress consultant. This is also with plugins. So let's say you installed a plugin and you did have a technical issue, which happens. I don't know how many plugins there are. I'm thinking 30,000 plugins out in the repository that you could install. Not all those developers keep up on their plugins as much as you believe they can be. A lot of the plugins are free, so support is limited. So what you can do to help augment that is to be a good WordPress user. So whenever there's a technical issue, you document the issue, you go to their support forum, and you create a thread that documents the issue, explains what you did, what was the expected output, what was the outcome that you were desiring, and what actually happened. And it will help them further diagnose it. And if you're nice, they might actually fix it right away. If you're not so nice, they don't really owe you anything. You can use another plugin.
So you don't want to shame them in public on social media.
Yeah, unless it's like chronic, or you get paid for that plugin, and it's a series of like the developer is refusing to fix something even though you did everything you could. That's like the last resort. Developers are not compelled by threats like that. They're like, all right, use another plugin. You don't like that WPF? There's 20 others you could use.
There's 33,000
Oh, I had a good estimate. 33,000 plugins. So what that means is that there's a lot of opportunity in that free market to find alternative, better plugins if it is something that's happening right now. But there's probably a lot of, out of that 33,000, I'm just going to venture to say probably 10,000 are very well supported, very well documented. And developers want to hear it because they aren't able to test under every server configuration and every other plugin conflict. So you can be able to diagnose that accordingly. Yeah.
Do you find that plugins don't work with the updates? Like if you neglect to keep your WordPress site updated,
yeah,
plugins might not be
absolutely.
fixed.
So here's what I caution against, although I might bite my words on this, bite my tongue on this, is when you hear of a new WordPress update, like, I don't know, 4.02 or something, you probably shouldn't update that hour. You should probably update the next day or so. Because unless you would be subjecting yourself to potential technical issues that would be fixed in a day or two. But if you wait a couple days after the new release and you install it, WordPress has a little compatibility rating on plugins. It says, works 100% with WordPress 4.02. You could pay attention to that. I don't really put a whole bunch of weight into it because that's just a voluntary reporting. It's not a technical source on that. However, if there's, if you're ever not sure, it's a major plugin like WP Cache or something like that, Super Cache or something, you could go to the support forum and see if you see a pattern of everyone's reporting a major issue. It's a little extra precautionary step if you're not sure. Largely, most plugins are pretty well supported and well-written code, and WordPress isn't making that much substantial changes to the core. So most plugins should work normally. Here's what I don't recommend. Don't update from WordPress 2.2 to WordPress 4.0. That big of a leap, there's a lot of code changes. You can totally feel comfortable updating WordPress from 4.01 to 4.02.
So
you don't have to worry.
So how do you do that? I have some that are in that, that lower range.
Yeah, to upgrade a very low version of WordPress, you basically need to copy the core files to the server. First, back up your site, but once you do it, you copy and download the core files of WordPress at wordpress.org to your server. You upload it, and you run it. Certain things might need to be changed, but you would have to do that manually once. I mean, if it's a super old version, you're better off deleting the core files and then uploading that new install.
So you can't, because I'm thinking, I'm on HostMonster, and they already have 4.0, so the one that I just did is 4.0. And I don't think they have the older versions of WordPress, so it's not like you can do it incrementally.
Yeah. Most hosting providers do not have old versions of WordPress sitting on their server. It's in their best interest to give the latest version that's shared out there.
So that's why you're saying go to WordPress and get those files from
if you're in that situation, yeah. I mean, most people, for most hosting configurations and most WordPress hosts today, you actually shouldn't do that because the server themselves, the web host company, will automatically put WordPress on your server for you. You don't have to overwrite those files, and that could cause more issues later. So just check with the web host. I'm assuming most people here who have a WordPress site, their host offers a one-click install or something equivalent to that to be able to just quickly open up a WordPress instance. You can update WordPress. So I think after, I don't know, I'm going to estimate 3.0 or something, you can automatically update core. When you sign in, you see a little arrow up at the top with a number next to it. You click on that arrow, you can just click upgrade, and it will update your WordPress files.
To wherever but you just said don't do it that way.
Don't upload files via FTP if your web host already has those files.
Inside of WordPress, you would just update.
Yeah. There's no way to increment it from inside the dashboard. You have to. I mean, if you have a really old one and you want to go to the newest and greatest, you'll have to get the files from WordPress.org. I don't know of any way to increment it, step by step. But if you fall somewhere in the middle, you'll get a message. Oh, we got to update your database now, and WordPress does that. I've seen it a few times.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, it's not likely that people are going to have a very old version.
Don't take too big a jump.
I do.
Okay. It's not very likely that an ancient version of WordPress. You could be
2011 or
Yeah.
Okay, that's like the 3.0-ish.
It's
Okay.
3 point something.
So you can just overwrite those files. If you're not sure, you just contact the web host.
It's a small site.
Yeah, they can even do it for you,
only have-
depending
Yeah.
on your support package.
Because I'm thinking that might be easier just as, to take all those files, put in a new theme and go from there.
That's
So we
awesome.
had a 3.2, need to go all the way up to 4.0. And as we did it, we crossed our fingers. We had plenty of backups. We had our processes in place. If it went south, we would just restore and start over again. And it worked all the way from 3.2 to 4.0. And so I think one of the things also about troubleshooting that's really important is if you have good processes in place, if you have backups that you can easily, there's a lot of ways, not a lot, maybe there's a couple of good ways to have one-click restore. You can get the white screen of death, and within 5 minutes, you can have a one-click restore. WordPress does it, WP Engine does it. So if you have good processes in place, like you can just not even worry about what happens. Like, I don't care what happens. Just get me back to where I was, and then I'll start slowly working my way through and make sure the site doesn't break again. You know?
That's and also Pagely. So a lot of services
Pagely, yeah.
are giving you that one-click kind of restore process, and they know because they're serving thousands of customers on their WordPress sites, they know what the causes are and they're able to fix it right away. So it's always worth a shot to check into that.
WordPress
This is some good information here.
WordPress has actual, here's how to do it.
So it says on the codex, when I say codex, it's not code, it's their documentation.
Yeah.
So if you go to WordPress.org and you click on, I think, either documentation or codex, you'll be able to find this. So it says about upgrading multiple versions. If you plan on upgrading more than 2 major releases, for instance, 2, 3, 4, if you plan on upgrading more than 2 major releases, consider upgrading incrementally to avoid potential conflicts and minimize the risk of database damage. For instance, if you're upgrading from 2.5 to 4.0, upgrade to 2.7 first, followed by 2.9, followed by 3.1, and so on.
But does it say how to do it?
They probably have links to the different files.
In this, it provides you an example. So WordPress does, because it is open source, they have archived copies that you could download. Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
And again, staging, like being able to put it in a test environment and do this stuff in staging.
But doing that, you're talking about taking the core code not through the WordPress site. You're talking about doing your FTP, going into the database, knowing how to manage files. I don't know how to do any of that kind of stuff.
Right. It's not the
the
fancy part.
Should have one of us do it.
How do we get one of you to do it? How much do we pay you to get one of you to do it?
And that is what we're going to end on in networking. It's time for everyone to network. You've heard how
You're not
everyone.
gonna answer that question?
No, I'm seriously, it's networking. It is networking. It's talking to all the people here. There's a lot of different people here.